Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the August session of Dr. Spotfire. My name is Neil Kanungo. I'm your host, and I'm joined today with we have two special guests. We have Dr. Streaming, Lorinda Bisnick. Hey, Lorinda.
Hey, Neil.
And we have our Chief Analytics Officer, Michael O'Connell. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Neil. Hey, Lorinda.
Hey, excited to have you guys on today. We're going to have a great session. There's a lot of interest around model ops and Spotfire, and we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to start with Michael, who will do a model ops core principles and a little demonstration of how model ops works in the greater ecosystem of the TIBCO platform. And then Lorinda is going to do a demonstration of model ops, the platform itself, the ModelOps product, how do you use it, how to get around in it. And she'll give a little example with a champion challenger analysis. And then I am going to do a Spotfire integration with ModelOps at the end. So we got a few different things going. Just some quick intro slides to get us started. Once again, our slogan is learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. The questions you ask drive your learning and push you into new territories where you can grow as an analyst and practitioner in data analytics. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel for the recorded sessions. This is live on YouTube right now, also live on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can watch these. If you don't have time to watch the whole session right now, you can come back and watch these on YouTube. Recommend signing up for that. And we also have a TIBCO Data Science YouTube channel as well. I would recommend finding that TIBCO Data Science channel and subscribing to that as well. So, without further ado, here's our feature session, ModelOps introduction with Spotfire, and I'm going to hand it over to Michael to get us started. Michael, do you want to go ahead and get going?
Perfect. Well, it's always fabulous to be on a Dr. Spotfire session, and I'm going to kick off and just give a little context around today's presentation. TIBCO Connected Intelligence, we connect to data, we unify data, we predict from it, with a connected experience, contextual AI built in and across the different clouds. And really our mission is to make it possible to unlock the potential of real-time data for making faster and smarter decisions. Now, this Connect stuff is all about real-time data integration, events, messaging. The Unify stuff is all about, as the data sort of comes to rest and you want to join it up with some streaming data, but, with multiple sources, and how do you do that and manage that? And then the Predict stuff we're going to focus on today, visual analytics and Spotfire, some model ops under the hood, and a little bit of streaming, and, all the different companies that use that. We're excited and honored to have you folks as customers. So we're going to go through this connected intelligence. You're going to see a little bit of data prep. You'll see a little bit of data science for model training. The data prep is more around exploratory data analysis, EDA. Data science is about creating and publishing a model. And then model ops is the star of the show around model inference, for streaming and batch data, managing that model, invoking the model, and then pushing results, in this case today into Spotfire. Now, it's a bit of a connective tissue, model ops, for joining these products together. You'll see Spotfire in action, data science is under the covers. You'll see a little streaming, a little bit of data management's under the covers, but model ops is kind of in the middle, connecting those things together. And that's really part of our connected intelligence story here. We're going to focus on the Spotfire business analyst persona, but there's, in reality, there's a lot of other things going on. You've got data scientists training models. There can be an open source models, or producing predictive model markup language, whatever you get to your training artifact that can be pushed into model ops then for Spotfire to connect to that. And then DevOps engineers and architects, DevOps engineers configuring the deployment scenario, architects designing and orchestrating the system. So a lot of personas here. Is a team sport to get a model into production and make it work. We're going to be focused on the Spotfire piece here, where we're going to be able to run governed models, whether they're in PMML, Python, Spark, TensorFlow, TIBCO Data Science, basically connecting those models into model ops so that we can manage those models and basically allow you to bring those into Spotfire. So a lot of advantages here. Firstly, getting machine learning into Spotfire for incorporating in your analysis. But really, a lot of folks on my team and other teams, you've got multiple versions of things typically. And you're like, how do you know, you've got a governed, proper version. That I think is really a nice thing for just the Spotfire user experience and managing what it is that you have in your current best analysis, and keeping track of those artifacts in ModelOps is really kind of convenient. So just in terms of a quick case study, this is dynamic pricing where we got self-service insurance. The people are coming up to a website, they're putting in their data around their driving record, who they are, and then we've got this quote server here that's giving them a quote. And if that quote, if they like it, they can accept it, or if they reject it, we save the quote and all of the data that's pushing into the model to get the quote. We save that over here into this repository, and then ModelOps is serving up the model into Spotfire that becomes this quote manager. And then as the data accumulate, we go back around and rebase that model to take advantage of the new data. And we're in the back end, we're looking at the regulators and the data science team are checking that the latest model that's been updated meets the regulatory requirements, making sure there's no bias towards different classes of folks, redlining, that kind of thing. And that new model can get put up, and you go around that virtuous circle there, from model training and evaluation to deployment on the event stream to monitoring and retraining. So that is kind of the flow here. I'm going to show you a little bit of the data that is used in the exploratory analysis, the model training a little bit, predicting the policy being renewed with multiple models and with explainability. And then, there's visual mods included in here, like the network chart for looking at correlations. And then the ModelOps part, predicting the renewal on the event stream. One key thing here, talking about principles, is the new data that you're predicting on has to be in the same range as the training data. And so, when you look at those data, and in fact, let me just jump in and show those data. So here's the data that we're looking at. We've got all these data on the driver, the vehicle type, fuel type. These are categorical predictors. You can see across the top here. The continuous predictors, the vehicle value, the age of the car, any claims costs and so on. You can play around here and look at, individual variables. I've got vehicle type up here at the moment, and you can see the no renewal response is in gray. The policy getting renewed is in blue. You can see with the stacked chart here that the hatchbacks are doing pretty well on renewal compared to the SUVs, for example. You can start to explore the data and understand, do exploratory data analysis basically on the numerical variables. Vehicle value. It looks like the higher the vehicle value, the less responses here actually. So you can see the effect here of vehicle value on policy renewed. You basically explore this data. You can look at predictor importance and understand, looks like invite premium and vehicle value, the two I was just looking at, have the highest importance value, so that they're the ones driving the renewal, those two variables. You can move these around a little bit. This is a correlation between all the different variables. So this is I can move the correlation score around and see, what are the correlations here in particular. I can see that those two important variables, invite premium and vehicle value, were kind of pretty highly correlated in the training data set. So that's something to look out for and understand, those two variables in their relationship in this current training data. I wonder how that's going to evolve as you get more and more data. So the correlations are interesting. And then the model build, you can, in Spotfire, you can call out to other products like TIBCO Data Science or Python to fit things like gradient boosted trees, random forest, logistic regression with different hyperparameters. You can look at which model is better than the other model here with the ROC curve and look at the accuracy of the model. And then in terms of evaluating the model, things like the confusion matrix, or you can go look at the probability distribution for the different models. You can see the differences between the random forest and the gradient boosted tree here. Looks like the random forest has got a nice sort of angle on it in terms of policy renewed versus probability. So that might be a good one to take forward. And then in terms of the explainability, you can look at things like, here's the invite premium. So if I'll highlight a couple of these invite premiums up here, in this case, it's having a strong effect on the policy renewal invite premium, but it's also a negative effect. So the higher the premium, the less likely it's going to be of getting accepted. But you can drill around on this and take a look at individual variables up here and look at their effect. Look at their effect across the population, but also look at their effect down here on an individual basis. So this is important because under various acts of Congress around the world, the various government policies, you have the right to understand why it is that you didn't get your credits score or your policy renewed, and this gives you the individual explainability for an individual application. Versus up here, you've got more of a batch analysis or overall trending, and you can see the vehicle value also has the effect there. That's another variable that we were looking at, and that is also a negative. So it's a strong effect on probability of getting renewed. But it's also in the negative direction. So higher vehicle values are going to have less likelihood of getting the policy accepted by the person making the application. So that's kind of the explainability part of it. And then going back to the flow here, once we put that model up into ModelOps, Lorinda's going to show you how you then map the model parameters that you've published up to the model up to ModelOps, how you map that to the new data. And so you start listening, for example, map the data channels to the parameters of the model. You can start listening for those data that are coming in. You can set up your scoring pipeline so that when you listen to the new data, you can get a score. And then you can update, the quotes that you're putting out, in this case, by county in the UK, the quotes and premiums by age across the top, the premiums that are getting quoted out over time. And these are all calculations, on top of the model. Things like commission and cost to win the business. These calculations, these derived data can be done, there's a Python module in ModelOps that allows you to create those decision tables. So you wire up the data, you get the prediction, and then the derived data that's feeding this real-time dashboard here that allows you to do profitability calculations and all that. And then you put that output onto the event stream, and you can show that directly in Spotfire, which does, real-time viz. And so, and then, as the data start to accumulate, you can actually, calculate the updated model and rebase it and put it back on the event stream. So this becomes what we call continuous analytics with streaming, data viz to boot. Now this rebasing part, so here I can see that, the original data here had this invite premium distribution to it, and it looks like the new data has higher invite premiums. Now we know that from the model, the higher the invite premium, the less likelihood you're going to get the policy renewed. And in fact, that's what you see here. This is a drift for the individual feature or the X variable. This is drift on the Y variable. And I can see in the original data, we had quite a lot of acceptances. But as the data has gone to more higher invite premium offers, that has dropped way down. So this is a important time to rebase. Not only has the X variable drifted, the prediction is drifted in association with that, and you're getting less premiums being accepted. So you really need to rebase this model. But that gives you a view on the drift analysis on what are the top drifting variables, how they're drifting, what's the effect on the Y variable and the prediction coming out of the new data, and the difference in the variable importances that you had. So this is a comprehensive drift analysis also in Spotfire that allows you to help with the rebasing. So Neil's Lorinda's going to show you how to wire this up, on another data set, and Neil's going to take you through an analysis where we're connecting up ModelOps into TIBCO Cloud Spotfire, with live data. So
Thanks,
I hope that was a good overview for you, Neil and Lorinda.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great to see the entire life cycle, where you have the actual data exploration, which you can do in Spotfire, and ModelOps, by the way, is a TIBCO agnostic tool. You can use it with your other data visualization tools. You can use it with other data modeling tools. But here we're showing you with Spotfire, you're doing your data exploration. You're actually building some models. You can build those models in Spotfire. You can deploy those models in ModelOps. You can wire that up with different data channels, different data sources. You can get those results back into your visualization tool, in this case Spotfire, and you can monitor for drift. You can do real-time scoring. real-time drift monitoring, and it's just the full life cycle. It's really great. So with that, Lorinda, shall I go ahead and hand things over to you?
Sure, sure. Thanks, Neil.
So I think you wanted me to show this first dashboard to get started, right?
Yeah,
On
or
the
we can even
transport.
just jump right into this dashboard that you're showing right now is probably has nothing on what Dr. O'Connell already showed. Right? It's the same idea as the drift. It's a champion challenger in your upper right corner. Upper right corner, yeah, right, left. You never know
Here we
on
go.
Zoom if we're flipping, if we're reversed camera. But what I want to talk about is not so much, you guys are going to talk about the Spotfire side of the house, but what's driving these visualizations is, as you said, a model agnostic tool allows us to take your investment in data science and deploy that model into what we call a scoring flow and then a scoring pipeline. And we deploy the pipelines, and then they're available in the cloud for quote unquote anybody to get after. We can deploy them as REST services, so really anybody can get after them, or we can deploy them in some other not REST. I'll just say it that way. So if you want to switch over to my screen share, we can go there and take a look at that. All right, so I have a couple of tabs open to give a couple of different views without needing to click back and forth. If you are looking at a ModelOps instance, you'll be presented with a sign-on screen. When you first sign on, you're in this little happy mode. I like to call that the happy mode. And welcoming. It's hopefully very welcoming from a user interface point of view. And what we really want to focus on is this area of the deployments. So the Spotfire dashboard that you were just showing, Neil, is being driven by some things that are running in this instance of ModelOps that are deployed. And in particular, for people who are brandy new to ModelOps, which I think this audience is, I want to call your attention to this type column. And so in ModelOps, we have different types of artifacts. And the very first kind of most natural artifact that you can think about is the model. Your investment in data science, you have a model from somewhere. We don't care. We like to say we're agnostic. We're model agnostic. Give me your model and store that model in here. And then we build around that model what's called a workflow. And then around the workflow, we attach it to physical data sources. That's what Doctor was talking about. To physically connect to the outside world to get data in and get data out. Those things are called data sources and data sinks. So we see some of those in this type column here. We have some deployed data channels. And then we take the workflow where you've put your model and you're going to score some generic data. We attach it to a physical data source. And then we deploy this thing out there, and a physical data sink as well on the other end. And we deploy it, and now it's available to be used. And so in this case, the dashboard that you showed is using this scoring pipeline, one of these two scoring pipelines. And I have several different deployed pipelines. And at least one of them, this top one, is deployed as REST. So we could hit it with Swagger. You could hit it any which way you want. And you're going to show in a little bit, Neil, you're going to show actually building one of these things. But if we kind of peel back one more layer of that, we can look at the pipeline, kind of, if you want to think about this as a deployment descriptor. And we're walking backwards, and I realize I'm throwing a lot of terminology at you, but this pipeline that we deployed is composed of a scoring flow. We see that here. I'm not sure on StreamYard if I can annotate, but I've named a scoring flow, and I'll walk backwards and show you that flow in a minute, and that's where your model is uploaded. That's where we're taking advantage of that artifact. And then we connect to our physical data, either via REST or we can name some of those deployed data channels. And in this case, we have a Kafka data channel that is providing us credit scores, and a Kafka channel where we're going to put the predictions of whether we think that we should or should not offer someone a loan based on the model that's being used. So again, as we look at this user interface of ModelOps, on the top left, we have the different types of artifacts and the different views. So I can go back in and look at what I have deployed. I can look at all my pipelines. I can look at what data channels I have available to me and their different types, as well as their names, how long they've been running. And down a little lower, I can look at all the projects that are in this particular instance. And within any given project folder, I have artifacts. So this is my actual Challenger PMML model. Down here, I have the model that I'm running in production. And so now let's take a look at wiring some of these things up. This is what we call a workflow. No code, low code, however you want to look at it. However, if you're a Python person and you want to get in here and add some scripting, you can do that. In the most minimal sense, a scoring workflow is 3 blocks. An input block that specifies what is my schema going to look like. And if I haven't had too much caffeine today and I only click once, you would see the little configuration dialog for what kind of input I expect to have. My scoring block itself, this is where I name the model that I'm going to use. In this case, I am using a PMML, but we support a whole bunch of different model types. And I want to call your attention right over here to this little downward arrow, revision 4. So this particular version of this workflow is using a certain version of a model. And I'll talk in just another more minute about that versioning and about controlling things and having, an audit trail and not just going into the Wild West of, oh, I'm a data scientist and I changed something, I'm going to put it into production. All right, where, ModelOps tries to help you in that way, to not let the Wild West happen. So I have a scoring block. And then, these other blocks are a little more advanced. Don't need to talk about them today. And then we send our data out somewhere in an output block. And again, the output block has schema associated with it. And this is the generic. So we just know that we have some schema that's coming into the model, and the model is going to produce some schema. How do we say, where are we physically going to get that data? We use this other tab, the pipeline, and we physically connect to one of our deployed data channels.
Okay. So I'm just going to recap some of this because there's a
I
lot
went
of
fast.
pieces here. You're going great, but there's a lot of new terminology and new things for our Spotfire audience. So you have a project, and in your project you have different artifacts, and artifacts can be schemas, they can be models, they can be pipelines, and can be scoring flows. So basically your project is holding everything that you need related to this this modeling exercise or this flow that you're trying to do, where you're trying to deploy your model. Within your project, you can create a scoring flow, and that's what you just showed, a scoring flow.
Yes.
Scoring flow has a source and a sink. The input is the source, the output is the sink, and in between that, you can have the scoring steps, which score your models. You can have a Python script. You can have metric scripts. You can have data matrices. You can have different steps in there. But the gist is that you have an input, you have the operation, and then you have an output. And then where you're about to go into is the pipeline. So there's an abstraction here that's happening. So basically, you have this scoring flow, but it's not really wired up to anything yet. It can be wired up to different pipelines. So you can be running multiple pipelines. You can think of the scoring flow as just a script per se that you want to then apply different pipelines to. So you're about to show how you can set up a pipeline using the scoring flow that you already created. And you could use, again, multiple pipelines with that same scoring flow, or you can use multiple pipelines with different scoring flows. So I'll stop interrupting there. I just wanted to kind of recap things that you had shown.
Right. I wasn't going to actually deploy one because I think you're going to show that when you
Sure.
run your fantastic demo that's upcoming that I'm holding you back from. I want to touch on a couple other things in here, terminology, and that the constructs that really help ModelOps. I'll say meet what we it's not just marketing ease, but the promises, the fulfill the promises that ModelOps is saying it can do. And the first one is that up here on the upper left-hand corner, we have this concept of spaces. And so you can be working in your own sandbox space. Think about it if you're a dev nerd, think about it as your own branch in GitHub, for instance, and nobody can see what you're mucking with over here. And when you're ready and you think that your workflow or your model is ready to go and be shared with others, then you can publish. This concept, we have a concept of publishing. Publishing takes something out of your sandbox and makes it visible to other people. Okay, so that's step number one. Once we build our little workflow and we say, we think this is ready for prime time, I'm going to publish. Then notice over here in this far column, this word environment. We have multiple environments. And data channels, the outer, the interfaces to the outer world, whether we have Kafka, REST, we can do files, we can do batch processing. Give me your file, I'll pull it off of a file system somewhere. We can pull out a JDBC, which includes TDV. So if you have a single source of data somewhere, I can create a data channel that'll go talk to your TDV server, pull that view, whatever view of data that you want, pull that into ModelOps and pass that to a model to score it. And then whatever's the outcome of my model, I can put it to any one of those same places. REST, send it back to somebody who called me via REST. I can send it back into TDV, write it into a table, a JDBC table, put it on a bus somewhere, on a Kafka bus for somebody to read, or write it back out to a file. So there's our ends, and data channels run in their own environment. It's a little odd for me. I still have a little bit of a difficult time talking about data channels being an environment compared to the other three environments. And you see two of them here on your screen, on my screen rather. They're similar yet different. So we're going to take data channels and set them off to the side for a minute. And now let's talk about the fact that I made this workflow. I published it so other people can see it. I'm a user, and whatever user I am, I'm logged in. I can see in this upper right-hand corner. Well, I like to be all powerful, so I'm logged in as admin right now. But normally you'd see username over there. That user has a role assigned to them. So ModelOps has a permissioning structure, users and roles, and the roles are permissioned for certain environments. And the environments out of the box are development, testing, and production. And so if I'm a newbie, maybe I'm only allowed to put things into development environment. Someone else with more privileges can take it and put it into the testing environment and do some testing. And if they say, yeah, okay, this is good enough, then yet again, someone else, maybe the same person, can then turn around and deploy that item into production. So what's behind the dashboard that you showed probably now 10 minutes ago, Neil, is this pipeline that is running in the production environment. Now, you can hook up to pipelines that are not in production, but I wanted to give that example as a way of provisioning, as a way of maintaining, making sure that we have the only things that we think should be out there and available to certain people out there and available, like, for instance, in production. We have these three stages. Again, those are the stages out of the box. I'll just leave it at that. I won't talk about it. I'll do my best to not really talk about any additional features right now. So I guess what I want to say also is that you're looking at an instance that's running, my instances are all running on AKS, but we also support EKS. You can run on-prem with OpenShift. And as an application, we are absolutely doing our best to take advantage of the underlying cloud technology. So, for instance, when this server gets crazy busy, if you were looking, again, if you were a cloud nerd and you were looking in Lens, if you were looking at your Kubernetes cluster, you would see it dynamically scale. You would see additional pods start up and then have the processes be reallocated across those new pods to accommodate the use of the server, of the ModelOps executable, the ModelOps instance that's running in that particular cluster. So that's kind of really what's happening behind the scenes. And I just really want to go back to the very beginning. If you have a model, I don't care where you got it from, I don't care what tool you use, you can come in here and build yourself a project, upload that model, right? And then roll forward. Build yourself a workflow, build yourself a pipeline where you attach to the outside world and you pull your data from anywhere, and then roll with it. It's deployed, it's in the cloud, and it's available for people to use and to leverage. And so instead of your data science sitting somewhere and going unused, you can put your investment out there for everybody to use potentially. Again, depending on how you want to expose it, whether you want to rest, whether you want to use it in Spotfire or some other visualization tool. It's actually a very cool next step in truly, I don't want to sound like a marketing person. Marketing people, don't worry, your jobs are safe with me. But in operationalizing, putting your model into operation, or sometimes we use the word democratization, right? Making it so that everybody has access to this data. I think
And
it's
I
a
think
team sport, right?
I think it's a great point, because people may be asking themselves, why do I want to use ModelOps? Why do I need this? I already have data functions. And data functions are great because you have that interactivity, you can drill down, you have marking, you can run that embedded right into Spotfire. But once you start to build models, you don't want to store those models in your DXP. You want somewhere where you can manage those models and you can operationalize them. So by taking the model out of Spotfire and putting it into something like ModelOps, you can then manage multiple dashboards using the same model. You can swap that with a different model and have a different pipeline. And then this way, you don't have to like go into each of your individual DXPs and update your data functions and change the models. It can be a whole mess with trying to manage all those files. This makes it your life a lot easier, a lot simpler.
Right. And I think that I keep saying the last thing I'm going to say. Really, I think this will be the last thing I'm going to say. Somebody watching might be saying, well, why is Dr. Streaming talking about ModelOps? We alluded to it a little bit earlier. You can be scoring continuously off of Kafka and sending your predictions or your results out via Kafka, but really, this is the next progression. You can think of it as the next step. I'm a streaming nerd. I came from the streaming world. I love it, but not everybody wants to program in event flow, right? So I could build a event flow node and deploy that node. I could wrap it in Docker and go deploy my Docker image somewhere. But this is just a level removed, so it makes it that much more available to people, because I understand and respect not everybody wants to be an event flow programmer. They don't want to build streaming applications that have a model operator, and then I deploy a new version of the model to that model operator to get the continuous loop that we talked about earlier. So it's another level of abstraction. It's another step in the progression of making data science available to everybody so that everybody can take advantage of it.
Yep, that's exactly right. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. So for any of you that want to learn more about streaming that Dr. Streaming has just explained with us, and we're excited to have Dr. Streaming on this call with us. There is a TIPCO streaming channel on YouTube that you can subscribe to, and you can learn all about TIPCO streaming. And I think you'll have some model ops sessions joining this as well, right? In some time,
Yeah,
right,
my next
Lorinda?
session next week, Dr. Streaming will have on the product manager for ModelOps, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth. I'm not exactly sure yet, but we'll talk some more about ModelOps for sure next week, if not sessions after that as well.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to now show the Spotfire integration piece with ModelOps. So for the Spotfire users watching, I also just wanted to quickly bring Tasia's comment on here. She was asking, will this be live later on YouTube? This, again, will be live on YouTube and LinkedIn. Well, it'll be recorded. It's being recorded right now as we're live, and it'll be available for viewing on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Be sure to put any questions you have right there in the chat. We'll bring them up on screen, and we can address them right here. We know that there's been a couple questions about getting hands-on TIPCO Academy test setups and labs. There is some content on TIPCO Academy already, and Lorinda is actually putting out some new content, some new enablement content on Academy. So you'll be seeing that coming in the near future as well. Okay, so with that, why don't I go ahead and show the why don't I go ahead and show the Spotfire integration with ModelOps. So what you're looking at here is Airbnb listings in the Boston area, and as Michael mentioned, you want to actually you want to score your model on similar data that it was trained with, it on the same test space or the same training space that your model was built with. So this is that training space. You can see the different variables and features in this data set. Um, you can also see the summary statistics here. So you can see latitude, bathrooms, bedrooms, things like that. You can see all of that on this train space. So what I'm going to do is actually use a data function to predict what the price of a Airbnb should be given these features. Something keeps popping up on screen there. Sorry about that. Um, okay, so given these features, so I'm going to bring my input table in, and I'm going to bring my training data, and then I'm going to bring my target column. I'm going to bring my training data again, and I'm going to specify the target column as price, and my problem type is regression. If you want to get these data functions from our community, these are available in the data function library, so you can actually wire these up yourself and get these for free. So this one in particular is a variant of our random forest data function that will write out a PMML file. So I just need to give it a PMML path. For a shortcut, I stored that in a document property. You can see right here, it's going to write out to my desktop as Airbnb PMML. So I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to run this random forest fit, and it'll take a couple seconds as it runs on the first few rows to ensure everything's working right. And then on the outputs, I can choose which outputs I want. I'm going to choose to exclude some of these metrics. I want to keep my feature importance table. I'm just going to exclude a couple things here. So what I'm going to get is a test set with predictions. I'm going to get a feature importance. So I'll hit OK. And this is now going to run on the remaining data in my random forest training set, and just give it a couple seconds to finish up here. Usually takes about 35 or so seconds. There it goes. All right, so now I have a random forest test set with prediction, and I can take this data, my price and my prediction, and I can plot this. Let me go ahead and remove some of this other stuff out of here. I can plot this. Let me color this by my residual. So I'll do price minus prediction. And I'll give it a 3-point color scheme. So here we can see the data points that are overpriced, or they're priced at a certain level that the prediction thought it should be lower. So these are overpriced listings we can see, and we can see underpriced predictions. Or predictions of underpriced listings. I won't show the feature importance table. That's not really relevant right now. Let's just get going with the actual model ops part. So this wrote out a PMML file. I can find that on my desktop here. I can see an Airbnb PMML file. Let me scroll down. Airbnb PMML file. So this was just written out. And this Airbnb PMML file, I can bring into my model ops environment. So let me go to model ops now and show you. I have an Airbnb project. Now I already did some of this just to save time, but you go into model ops and you can upload artifacts. When you go to upload artifacts, you then select your PMML file or whatever model file that you have. Here's the Airbnb PMML. You can open that and it will add it to. I'm not going to add it right now, but you can hit this and then you can hit upload and it'll add it to your project. And then when you have it in your project, you can click this. We had to look up what was the 3-dot button, right, Lorinda? And the 3-dot button is
The kebab.
the kebab, right? The kebab button. So you hit the kebab button and then you can create schemas, and this will extract the input and output schemas from your PMML file. So I'm not going to do that right now. I've already done it. It's going to create these 2 schema files. And then I want to create a scoring flow. So I go into the scoring flow. So this is, in your interface, you have your different spaces that Lorinda talked about. You have tabs up at the top. You have your projects at the bottom left, settings and preferences at the very bottom left, and then you have your different spaces here that you can go to. So I'm going to go to the scoring flows. I can create a scoring flow. I can call this, so I want to say what project it is. It's an Airbnb project. I'm going to call this test flow. I'm going to hit create. And here I'm going to add an input step. And for my input step, I'm going to bring in the schema from my model schema Airbnb 2. I bring in my input schema. And this schema has 21 fields. Okay. Now, oh, wait, sorry. I actually want to do this a little bit differently, right, Lorinda? I want to use a pre-setup one.
Well, you don't have to. I thought you were going to go into the Wild West.
Yeah, you have these templates, is which I was going to say, right? So you can. Right. You can
try to give you a step in the right direction. So we have a few drawn, if you want to call it that, workflows that you
right.
from which you can choose.
Right. So you can do these from scratch, or you can actually use this template here, which is a scoring template. And I meant to show this as a shortcut. This will automatically create the flow for you. So you can then configure it this way. So my model schema, I want my input schema, same thing. And then in my score, I want to take a model. I'm going to add this model ID as my Airbnb model. And I'm going to add an input schema of selected model. So this is going to take the schema from the input node, and then I need to populate the values, the unset values with the entries from that input node. So now that I see a check mark there, that's all set up, and now I only need to set the output. I'm going to load the schema from my model schema, my output node, or my output schema. And I want to populate this from, I can choose to populate this from anything previous. I want to populate it from the scoring node. So you'll see this step here, populate from step score. And then I can save it. And I can publish it. So you'll see it's revision status up here in the top right. I can publish this. I'm going to call this test flow for Dr. Spotfire. I can publish that. Now back in Spotfire, so this is just a scoring flow, but there's no pipeline set up. I don't actually need to set up a pipeline when I'm doing a Spotfire data function. So the Spotfire data function is an extension that you can find in the ModelOps documentation. I meant to have that link ready. I'll put it in the chat later, or I'll put in the video description later. But in the documentation, there's a link to a Spotfire extension that is for the ModelOps data function. So when you go to register new, you'll get this option for R script, Python script, and now ModelOps data function. And I'm going to just call this one Dr. Spotfire Flow. And let me get my ModelOps server ready. So my ModelOps server link, server URL is here. And what this is going to do is this is actually going to, let me log in. This is actually going to create a pipeline in ModelOps when I run this, and then I'll be able to create scoring flow. So let's see how that works. So first, I can select my project. I have my Airbnb project. This is now connected to the ModelOps environment, the instance I had running. I have this test flow that I just created, and I have this price prediction flow that I already had in there. And then I can choose my target environment. I'm going to run this in development. And then I can hit run, and I'm going to run this on a actual test data set. So I trained this on the training data set. I'm going to actually now score test data. So on my input, I'm going to do my test data. I'm going to search for, I'm going to put all my columns in for the test data, and I'm going to actually limit this on markings. And I want to refresh it automatically. I'm going to make this interactive. And for my output, I'm going to create this new data table called output. And I'm going to hit OK. And you can see here, it's already started executing the data function. The first thing it says is deploying pipeline for scoring. So the first thing ModelOps is going to do is actually, I can see this in deployments. It says a few seconds ago, Neil Kanungo created the deployment, the job, Dr. Spotfire Flow. And so this is actually creating the pipeline. It's using that scoring flow, which we already created, and it's now setting up its own data source and data sink. The data source is from Spotfire. The data sink is from Spotfire, so it's automatically setting that up for you. The first time you run a data function with ModelOps and Spotfire, it's going to take a little bit longer because it has to set up this pipeline. But once the pipeline's set up, that will stay as long as your data function is in your Spotfire DXP and you have Spotfire open. It'll stay, so you don't have to keep setting up this pipeline. This is actually spinning up Kubernetes pods for this actual pipeline, right, Lorinda?
Yes, and what the other thing I want to say here is that the ModelOps extension for Spotfire is wrapping. If we want to think about that, it takes your workflow and wraps it in a REST request response type of a pipeline. So you'll see, if we don't already, because your eyes are better than mine, we see another job from a minute ago from you. The second one down on the screen, if you want to move your mouse up one more maybe, that says REST request response. So Spotfire is the requester, and it will be the to whom ModelOps sends the response. And so that's the wrapping. Just as I showed earlier, you could expose as a REST pipeline. Those are the APIs that the extension is using. So it took your workflow and wrapped it in that type of a quote unquote data channel.
Right. That's right. So let's take a look at the results in Spotfire. So what we want to do is I actually have this is actually the training data that we're looking at. I have a page set up with the test data. The test data is much smaller, and so I can mark data, and you'll see that if you see very quickly, it's actually executing a ModelOps data function in the bottom right. So you can barely see it. It happens so quick. So let's actually visualize this. Let me bring in a display value mod. And I'm going to set this up with my output table. Remember, the output table is what comes out of this ModelOps data function. And my value, I want to be the price. So that's the only thing coming from the output schema of the PMML file and my scoring flow. I have a price prediction. And so here I can select a property and it's giving me a prediction of that price. So that is a prediction coming from ModelOps. I can click a different property and I can see a prediction of that price. So what we just did as a recap is we used Spotfire to train on our data. We used the Python engine Spotfire to train on our data, but also to write out a PMML file. We imported that PMML file into ModelOps. We imported that PMML file into ModelOps, and we created a flow. Our PMML file is inside here. And then we created data function that created a pipeline that was deployed and is now connected with Spotfire. And I can just rerun this pipeline whenever I need to and get new predictions on new data.
All right, I'm gonna put in a little term there, Neil. You're not rerunning the pipeline. The pipeline will stay running.
I'm rewriting the flow. Sorry.
That's okay. We're executing the pipeline. So the pipeline's running and it'll stay running until you close your DXP. At the point in time when you close your DXP, the extension is built such that it says, all right, well, the DXP isn't around anymore, so I guess I can cancel this deployment because the rest response cycle that it was tied to has gone. So there's no need for this guy to continue to be running. So we quote unquote undeploy, or we cancel the deployment.
Right. So that's how. So you can actually not do this on markings. You can do this with a larger test set. You can do this with much larger data. You can get those results in Spotfire, and then you can actually start building out those analysis. You can build out the monitoring dashboards. You can have, let's say you have new data coming in on a data stream and you want to continuously score on that. You have your production model here in purple. You can have your challenger model in pink here, and you can compare those. And then if your challenger model is doing better, you can then deploy your challenger model into production. So that's why this abstraction is useful. So that's why using ModelOps to manage your models can be more useful than just using them all embedded within Spotfire. So with that, I think I'll check to see if there's any questions. We'll bring on our participants. So we have Michael and Lorinda here. Anything you want to add to that, Michael?
No, I just saw that someone was asking a question about feature engineering during the training. Daniel answered that you can do feature engineering in ModelOps, but if you're actually in the process of learning, then you can do that in the earlier step in Spotfire or in your other tool that you're using for training. So yeah, I mean, it's like you've got different places to do different things, but the analysis I showed had the feature development was happening during the training step.
But yeah, it could have, you can have a Python block. So the flow that I showed that had more blocks to it, you can have Python blocks there, and you can use Python scripting to do some of your steps. And then again, that Python becomes also a managed artifact that's versioned. You can say, all right, version 5 was better than version 6. We need to roll back to version 5, right? We've all done that. We've all made that mistake and said, I'm a fan of, in my house, my children tease me that my most often used phrase is undo, undo, undo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. In the example I showed, the Python was used for deriving data for all the decision tables, the discounts and that sort of thing. So, the derived variables outside of the actual inputs to the model. So yeah, there's lots of flexibility in where you do, the derived variables.
Well, thank you, Michael and Lorinda, for joining, and thank you all for joining our session. This will, again, be available as a recording on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Be sure to email us at drspotfire@tipco.com if you have any other questions. We'll have new enablement coming out on the TIPCO Academy and more information with ModelOps as we're continuing to get this out in your hands. And we're eager for you to get started with this. So let us know if you have any questions. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, Neil.
Good stuff. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Lorinda. All the best.